Welcome to episode 90 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we're chatting to South African extreme swimmer and record holder of the Robben Island to mainland crossing, Ryan Stramrood. Evening, Ryan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, very well, thank you. You've just had a big achievement recently, which we'll get on to shortly. But congratulations. That's quite an achievement, huh?
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm chuffed. Glad it's out the way.
Yeah, I'm sure. Ryan, tell us, have you always been a swimmer from an early age?
No, not at all. And that actually forms quite a big part of my narrative. Is I was a proper couch potato, still at the age of 28, 29, going into my 30s, getting fairly fat and useless. And I've always enjoyed swimming, never done it seriously, but I sort of made a bit of a lifestyle change back then and decided I'm going to get in the swimming pool and just basically get fit, start getting a little bit fit. And that first move off the couch and into a swimming training squad has taken me on an incredible journey so far. I'm loving it.
Certainly has. And that first swim, you only managed a few lengths and then you were absolutely knackered.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I joined a squad, a gentleman called Gary Freeling, who's still my coach today, by the way. He runs a squad. And I was encouraged to join his squad by a client that I took away once on business. And got in that pool. And of course, you put in a lane with other guys and they all a lot fitter than you. So you try keep up with them, which is not a clever thing to do. And 20 lengths later, that's half a kilometer. I remember, that horrible dry heave of pushing too hard when you're too unfit. And I'm very, very pleased with myself, A, for getting there in the first place, and B, for then going back the next day. Because that's the discipline, and that's where the fitness just, next time I could do 22 lengths and so on.
That's pretty impressive. I mean, my wife's a swimmer, and I've had a couple of swims against her, and I do 2 lengths and then I'm done. So 22 at your first go is good going.
Yeah, well, you know what? I love it when the new guys start the squad. Now I'm the old veteran, and I watch them all fall into that exact same trap. Because those first two to 4 lengths are easy, and then it hits. Anyway, good humor.
And then, Ryan, what made you do your first Robben Island swim? So essentially, for those that are listening, it's Robben Island to Milnerton.
Essentially to Blouberg Beach is the most popular route, and that's also the shortest, 7.3 k's as the crow flies. Adam, it's shortly after joining the squad, you start to meet people in the squad and people who have done crazy things and you're impressed. And a gentleman called Tony Selmayr handed me a book of open water swimming as I was leaving squad somewhere in the early days. And he said, you should read this and perhaps set your standards or your goal as a Robben Island crossing. And I remember taking that book from him, thinking, what's he smoking? I mean, a Robben Island crossing, 7.3 kilometers in a speedo in that icy water, that's reserved for the kind of people that you read about, the superhumans, definitely not me. And that was very genuinely my headspace at the time. And again, I can't remember exactly why, but something made me take on the challenge. And you start to meet more people who have actually attempted it or done it, and you start to say, well, maybe I must give it a go. But it took a long time before it was a real goal. And then around 2003, I said, right, I'm going to try and do this crossing. And on my first attempt, I made it to Blouberg Beach. And that exhilarating feeling of 2 hours and 15 minutes later, I think on my first swim, when you put your foot down and you hit sand there on the beach in Blouberg, because you usually swim from the island to the beach. And you walk out after having swum from that island that you've looked at for so many years, driving into town, living in Cape Town. It was just an incredible feeling. So awesome.
Now, Ryan, we chatted to Joel Stransky a couple of weeks ago, and last year he did Comrades, Two Oceans, Ironman, the Epic, and the Freedom Swim, which is commonly known as the swim from Robben Island to Blouberg. Yeah. And he said of those 5 disciplines, that swim was the hardest thing he'd done ever. And that included playing rugby against the All Blacks.
Yeah, correct. And I was blessed to be there. I swam with Joel on that day. So I met him before, and he was super nervous, and it was quite amazing for me because I've watched Joel Stransky, and I've put him on this massive pedestal of being the superhero, and here I was before a Robben Island swim with him, hankering on my every word, and like, what do I do? And I'm so nervous. And Joel did extremely well that day. He did wear a wetsuit for it, by the way, which eliminates a lot of the cold, but it's a long way. And if you're not a gifted swimmer, your disciplines lie in other places. It's a very daunting swim, and it was a misty day. It was very, very cold. So Joel did well, and he doesn't have a lot of body weight. No, but I enjoyed that day.
And Ryan, I mean, Joel said he would never ever do it again, ever. It was that difficult.
Yeah,
Last week, you completed your 109th crossing. I mean,
correct.
what's wrong?
Yeah, you know what? I also get asked that quite a bit. What is wrong, and why have I done it so often? So my 109th was a milestone for me in that that's pipped the record. So I now have the most Robben Island crossings of anybody alive. My late friend Theo Yach set the bar extremely high at 108. And last Wednesday, I took that off him. You have to debate whether you call it a record or we just call it the most number of crossings or whatever. But it was never a goal that I set out in the beginning to do. I mean, Robben Island is generally something you do once. It's, you set it as a bit of an Everest, and it becomes your Everest as a swimmer. And you achieve it. But I kept coming back because, once you've done it once, you think you're a hero, and then someone says, well, won't you swim with me on mine? And you're like, yeah, okay, sure, I'll do that. And you end up doing two. And then I started becoming fascinated with the element of cold, and my swimming journey really started. I started to understand how that cold gets inside you. That water is freezing. The challenge of a Robben Island or any cold swim is far less about the distance, because you can train for that. You can get yourself fit, you put in the hours, it's almost formulaic. However, the cold, humans have just not evolved well to handle cold. We've evolved extremely well to avoid it. So you throw yourself in that water and all this stuff starts happening, firstly to your body, but most importantly to your mind. And it implements this pain, this panic, this fear. And those all come together extremely quickly, and they accentuate self-doubt. So you start to look for reasons why you should get out the water. You denied the ability of rational thought to, instead of going, oh, you know what, I'm very cold, and yes, I know eventually this cold will kill me, and that's a good reason why I should stay in the water and keep going. Your defense mechanisms are way too powerful, and all you can think of is get out, get out, get out, get out. And that's extremely hard to override. It really is. And it's a well-evolved survival mechanism, and it's a sensible thing to do as well. However, what I've learned is that this unbelievable survival mechanism is way too overzealous. So it wants you to get out in minute number one. But you've still got a lot of margin on the other side of that before you're any kind of real danger. And that's where the magic happens. And the more I started to do Robben Island swims and cold water swims, the more I started to understand this and to realize how I can extend my time in the cold, less about body conditioning, but more about mind. So once you understand all those little mechanisms that are happening, I mean, of my 109 Robben Island crossings, I'm usually the first question I get asked usually, Adam, by the way, is do you ever see sharks? And I can tell you now that an open water, cold water swimmer sometimes prays for a shark to come here because all those defense mechanisms have kicked in, and you're looking for an excuse to get out, but you don't want to lose face. So you're hoping that your support crew alongside, maybe they spot a fin in the distance and they yank you out. And it's not my fault, I had to get out. So the point of that is that you start to look for reasons why you should fail. And it's very hard in that moment to look for reasons why you should keep going. In the middle of a Robben Island crossing, the shore seems a million miles away. You're uncomfortable. Often there are things that are stinging you. That cold is starting to creep in. It gets scary. It hurts. Everything is tensing up. It's just not a happy place to be. Sometimes the wind comes up, so now there are waves and you can't get any kind of rhythm. And as a little head bobbing in the water, you can't even see the beach and see the top of the mountains and the buildings. And many, many, many times in this swim and in bigger and better swims, that starts to become a little bit too much. You've got the element of cold making you negative, and you can't see the shore. You can't fathom how you can reach that shore. And I'm very grateful for the journey, because I've realized that the second, if I get through that process and I manage to stay in, when I put foot on that beach and I walk out and I dry myself, within minutes, I've forgotten every little piece of pain and discomfort out there, and there's just a big smile on my face. It's just euphoric, and I take all the lessons I learnt and only think of the good. And then you start applying that to life in general. Sorry to get philosophical on you, but this is these are the real lessons, and why I now stand on stages around the world, because you start to realize that this defense mechanism that I'm talking about doesn't only happen in the cold, it happens in everyday life. Whenever there's a problem in business or in your life in any area, it's extremely hard. Well, let's take lockdown for that matter. Here we are still doing this interview now in lockdown. And in the beginning, things are relaxed now, but in the beginning, it seemed like it would never end. I mean, we were given 3 weeks. I mean, 3 weeks of sitting in your house, that you can't possibly do that. And this is dying, and that's going to end. The world is crashing. And I've been just as impacted as everybody else. So let me not put myself on any kind of pedestal. However, I've known with great confidence that as soon as things start opening up, as soon as this is all over, it's going to be forgotten. And we're just going to take the learnings and all the important stuff that we've actually been forced to learn inside this lockdown, all those new foundations that we've been forced to build, and we're going to be standing on a platform to take ourselves into the future. And I know that this country will recover. It's got a long road, but I take the positives. So I'm giving an extremely long answer to this question. So I started to do more and more Robben Islands, and then I started to do bigger and better swims, and Robben Island is just the best training ground ever. And slowly my numbers started to rack up. And started to close in on the 100, and then that became a goal, and then the record became a goal. But it's a great, the 5-second answer is it's a fantastic training swim with all the elements: cold, stinging things, psychology, wind, currents, etc.
And Ryan, we'll get back to this, the sporting element, but I do want to just point on that one point that you've made. In terms of the learnings that we've made during lockdown, do you think we will take those out and keep them going? Or are we going to all fall back into normal way of life, and it's just going to go back to the way it was, and lockdown will become a thing of the past and forgotten? Because I'm hoping it won't.
Yeah, I'm hoping it won't. I think it will, definitely will to a degree in some areas, but I can guarantee you there's going to be a lot different. And I think the people who have said, right, I'm in this situation, I'm not going to sit back. I'm not going to create an inward solution and kind of go into a huddle and a hibernation and wait till other people do stuff, and then hope that things are better when I stick my head out from where I'm hiding. The people who have gone out and said, right, here I am, what can I do? And if I can't think of anything to do in my own circles, how can I help somebody else? Because when you're helping that other person, you're going to learn stuff. You know, the thing I preach the most, I mean, I do this inspirational speaking, and my message is so simple, that if you stay inside your comfort zone, you cannot learn new stuff. And if you stop learning new stuff, you cannot grow. When you stop growing, you get knocked over. As simple as that. But getting out of that comfort zone is extremely hard. And that's that. I mean, it sounds so easy. Oh, get out of your comfort zone. Every inspirational speaker with his salt says that. But how? And I try and explain a little bit of that. So those who have got out of their comfort zones and have tried different things, and certainly nearly everyone, including myself, have failed at things we've tried. But every failure, there's a beautiful lesson somewhere. It might be a tough lesson, but you use it for your next attempt at something else.
And I mean, I've worked in the corporate industry, and you sit in these offices where there's just hundreds of people. I actually hope these corporates are going to take a learning from that and figure out that people can actually do more work from home and more productive from home, and
Correct.
in turn it becomes safer. So let's see.
Yeah. And I think that in turn will sorry, just to cut you now, I think that in turn, if the corporates do apply that and make it work for themselves, that will do wonders for lifestyles.
100%.
And when your lifestyle improves, just more time with your kid, more time at home, more free time, because you can manage your own time, better positive mind, and good things flow.
Let's go back to your swimming, Ryan. So you did your first one in 2003, but you didn't stop there. I mean, there's a list of swims that you've done. And, you know, I could spend 10 minutes talking about them all, from the Straits of Gibraltar to Siberia to the North Channel Double. Again, why are you doing all of these swims? What's
Yeah, you know what, you get sucked into. I've been on a wonderful journey, and I eventually, after I'd done a couple of Robben Islands, once again way before my time that I should have in terms of experience, I set the English Channel as a goal, and that is pretty much 40 kilometers from Dover in the UK across to France. It's 34 k's as the crow flies, but you really swim, you don't swim straight. And that I eventually, you train hard for that. That's 2 years of brutal training, and that's what you call total body confusion training. So you can't just do the training in a swimming pool and then jump in the English Channel. You've got to look for the worst water when it's roughest, swim in the dark, swim in the warm, swim in the cold, swim in the rain. Never let your body get used to it, because the English Channel just throws stuff at you that you won't believe. And when I succeeded at the English Channel, in 12 hours and 54 minutes of swimming in my Speedo in cold water, I started to take a slightly different journey, and I met up with a bunch of mates who were just as fascinated by the element of cold as I am. And we started to realize that the colder it gets, the more profound those defense mechanisms are. And where is the point that you can no longer override your own defense mechanism safely? Obviously, we don't particularly want to die, and we're not cowboys. But where the medical journals were saying the end point is not where it is. And we figured that out quite early in our careers. So we started to take on different swims, and I became what I suppose is titled an extreme swimmer, and that became an ultra extreme swimmer in temperatures, because we started to do stuff in the very, very, very cold waters, like the 0-degree range. And then a gentleman called Bram Kai, who I was a good mate with at the time, founded the International Ice Swimming Association. And that formalized a lot of things. So we said to the world, I say we because I was a founding member, but it was his idea. If you can swim 1 mile, that's 1,609 meters, in an outdoor body of water, wearing only a Speedo type costume and one cap, no grease, no wetsuit, obviously. And that water has to be 5 degrees Celsius or below. If you can swim 1 mile in your Speedo in 5 degrees Celsius water, the International Ice Swimming Association shall give you a certificate to say you have achieved an ice mile. And that Ram sent that out to the world, and that took on a life of its own. So we then were invited as a group all over the place to Siberia and to the Arctic and to the Antarctic and all over the place to show them to compete in different events. And then you meet some crazy people and they're planning something, and then you included in that, and off you go. Before I know it, I was trying to swim from Russia to the USA solo in the middle of the Bering Sea. And I remember thinking like, well, what? But it's been a good journey.
Since then, about the IISA, they've now started a World Championships, which you've taken part in a couple of them.
Correct.
How many people actually compete in this sport? It can't be that many.
You'll be amazed. The colder countries are quite keen on this, and I don't know the stats offhand, Adam. I've moved a little off the International Ice Swimming Association now, but at the time, and there are at least 23 countries when I parted company that partake. And there have been a lot of official ice miles that have been ratified by ourselves. We used to get all the papers and sit there and decide if he's followed all the rules or not, because we had very strict rules. So there are a lot of, it's a massive, massive mental challenge. It's dangerous. They've now, since they encourage less the mile distance, because things get quite serious there, and more kilometer distance, because that's a shorter time in the water, and generally there's far less chance of things going wrong. And all the events have, they've got just different shorter distances and events at the world champs and the various other nationals, etc.
And Ryan, you've obviously swum a lot. You've swum on almost every continent. I think probably you have swum on every continent. Has there been one swim that was stand out the hardest that you had to take on?
That's an interesting question. There's definitely the first one I'm going to say, but I firstly want to create a little bit of context. One of my hardest swims was right here, this Robben Island swim that I've done 109 times. Early in my day, I tried to swim to Three Anchor Bay, so it's an 11-kilometer route. So remember, swimming from the island to Bloberg is 7.3, but if you want to be brave, you can try and swim to the longer distance. And it was my first ever attempt at a Three Anchor Bay swim, and I had it in my head that I'd like to break the 3-hour barrier, which is very, very rarely done. I was going to push it really hard, and I thought I could possibly do it if I read the currents right and the moon cycles and all the stuff you've got to do. that I could get it done in about a 2:55. And that day it took me 5 hours and 24 minutes. Okay. Now it's just a simple swim. We just hit the wrong current running down the coast and it got hold of me. And I had calibrated my mind for sub 3, but yet I swam 5 hours and 24 minutes. And that was the closest I come to actually breaking. I refused to get out, or I had to touch land, but that taught me more lessons than any of my other swims. And then I'm going to jump from that very mundane example in comparison to some of the stuff I've done and go to Antarctica, where with a group I wanted to try and be the first to do an official ice mile south of the Antarctic Circle. And that, the time our understanding was that shouldn't have been possible, because it would put me in the water for at least 27 minutes. And cutting a very long story short, we never got the geographic goal because the weather was too terrible when we were south of the circle. But we just north of the circle, and it didn't make any difference to the water temperature. It was -1 degree Celsius because your salt water freezes below. It was absolutely petrifying. You've got these massive leopard seals and things swimming, and orca, and it's very, very, very daunting. And we were, paid passengers on an ocean liner, so we had to walk down this big ship, down a gangway, and jump off and do a mile swim. And it took me 32 minutes that day, and I managed to finish it, and I managed to survive it. They brought me back to life, and I achieved it. But, I could write a book about those 32 minutes of what went through my mind, and, how you start to lose your mind, and then you get it back, and then you petrified, and then you calm, and then you petrified, and just how at a point it went completely from me to my support team. So they've got a boat right next to me. So I'm swimming here. And if those guys were taking photos of penguins and ice and WhatsApping mates, I would have pulled out because I was absolutely petrified. But they were looking at me and they were clapping because I was so confused and in such dire straits, because you're dying, and you're dying quickly in that water. And I just had to reach that goal. I had to get my hand on that gangway and pull myself out the water, and then I had succeeded. But you honestly, you can't calibrate. You can't calibrate the distance to how your body is going down. So you're not sure you're going to make it, and you're petrified that you're just going to sink. So you want those guys to watch you, that if you pass out, they can grab you and pull you back in. So it did a lot of weird mental stuff. And then I'll give you one quick answer. The other one that taught me the most lessons, most valuable lessons, which was a failed swim, and you always learn the most from failures, is I went to try and swim from Russia to the USA, between two little islands called the Diomede Islands, which are smack in that Bering Sea where they shoot that Deadliest Catch program. So it's great. It's a wonderful place. And I flew from Cape Town to Joburg to London, London to New York, New York to Anchorage, Anchorage to Nome, Nome to Prince of Wales. And then I got on a boat and I went to a little island and tried to swim. And the water was meant to be 6 degrees, but it turned out to be 3.5 degrees Celsius. And again, I promised a short answer, but I failed that swim, and there are reasons I failed, and I learned a lot. I did the distance, but I can't claim the record. It's a 3.8 kilometer distance between an island in Russia and an island in the USA, and the international timeline runs down the middle. So there's, this island's 23 hours away from that island. So you're swimming into yesterday or back into tomorrow. I don't know, I get confused. But it was the currents that rush between those two, and there's these massive walrus that everybody's petrified of, including me. And it was just too much for my mind. And we lost our support crew because they couldn't get permission to be in Russian waters. So we were legally in Russia, and it's a military base, so they were coming to get us. Here I am in my Speedo. So again, watch for my book. It's a fascinating story, I think, but it's going to take up too much of your time to tell it all.
No, looking forward to that read. Just back to your swim in Antarctica. Tell us about getting out the water. So, I mean, you've been in this ice cold water for 27 minutes odd. I mean, it can't be easy getting out of the water. And how do you actually get back to sort of normal body temperature, get warm again?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was I was in the water for 32 minutes in Antarctica. And the most dangerous part of any extreme cold swim is not while you're swimming, it's actually when you finish. And the reason for that is one of your defense mechanisms when you get in cold water is all your blood rushes from your extremities, not just fingers and toes, like from your arms, biceps, thighs, everything. That rushes to your center core to keep your vital organs pumping. I'm no medical dude, but you can live without arms and legs, I suppose, but not without a heart pumping blood up to your brain. So all that warm blood sits in your center core, and when you finish your swim, that warm blood that's keeping you alive starts to go back to those extremities so they don't fall off. And your extremities are now absolutely frigid because you spent half an hour in -1 and they're pretty much frozen closed. And that blood now goes back into them and it gets super cold super quick. And then it flows back into your core. So there's a thing called the after drop. So after a swim, your core keeps dropping. And there's very little you can do about that. Although we've pioneered a couple of techniques in our training and what we do. But yeah, so your question was, how do we? We have a lot of preparation, and you have a team who needs to know exactly what they're doing, and you need a facility that is superheated. And what we do is we calibrate our minds so that our swim is not over when you climb out that water. Your swim is over when you turn the corner. So once your core stops dropping, and there's a very palatable feeling, you can feel it distinctly when you turn from going down, which is really scary and terrible. You turn the corner and you start recovering, and that shivering starts, and shivering's good. We try and engage our minds as much as possible and just know when you get out the water, that's actually probably the start of your swim, because it's brutally painful and it's deadly dangerous. So yeah, it's between a mental focus, which is hard to do when you're hypothermic, and a support team that is there to bring you back to life and keep talking to you and making sure you come out the other side.
Really not just all about the swimming.
No, it's not.
Ryan, we met your son at the start of the interview, or just before we started. Does he think you're absolutely nuts, or has he now shown an interest and is thinking of doing the same thing? I know he's only 8, but...
Yeah. No, look, he loves swimming, but I really hope he doesn't follow in my footsteps with this stuff. I hope he swims wonderfully, but at the moment I'm just cool. Like, obviously breaking the Robben Island record. I'm on the news tonight, and I've been in front page of some of the local newspapers, and I'm on radio stations and doing cool interviews with you. So I get a little bit of a coolness factor from my son, which is nice. I'll take it. But the spin-off with this ice swimming stuff is, I don't like the cold, and a lot of people think I love it, but I don't. I'm human. We haven't evolved well to handle it. So we'll be driving in the car, and he'll open the window on a freezing day, and I'm like, no, close it, it's freezing. And he's like, Dad, you're an ice swimmer. so no, that's where we are. I don't think he thinks I'm too cold. It's more like gnats.
And Ryan, I mean, we could chat for ages about this. Just in closing, what's left for you to do? I mean, you've swum the everywhere. You've swum in the States, Alaska, Australia, Chile, US, Russia, England, Scotland. I mean, what's next?
There's so much more. I'm moving away from the cold a little bit. I feel I've learned my lessons there, but not entirely. There's still a lot of big channels that I don't know if I really want to do. And with me, there needs to be a hook. I need to want to do it. There's got to be like, Russia to USA. That entices me. That's hard, and it will be cool to do. And I love swimming between continents and that. But just swimming a big open body of water doesn't excite me that much. So I'm looking at, to be honest, before lockdown, I was on standby to give False Bay an attempt, which is, from Miller's Point to Royals, or the other way around. So that's 36 kilometers as the crow flies. And that's a tough swim, and it's a big swim, and the psychology of being out there by yourself is also quite hectic. So I think that will probably, once I'm able to get fit enough again, I'll put myself back on standby for that and give that a go.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you out there and then back in the news and hearing of another successful swim.
Great. Well, thank you.
Ryan, it's been brilliant chatting today on Sport SA Daily Diary. Thank you so much for your time. Good luck with all your future swimmings. It's certainly an amazing achievement.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your interest. Thanks for chatting to me, and well done on your channel. I think it's brilliant.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Cheers.
Cheers. Look out for tomorrow's episode of Sport SA Daily Diary, where we chat to South Africa's very own world champion bodyboarder.